The Galactic Council chamber had seen many crises over the centuries. Asteroid strikes, plague outbreaks, the occasional interdimensional invasion. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared the assembled delegates for this level of pants-wetting terror. Commander Vex, a 7-foot-tall reptilian with more military decorations than actual personality, stood at the central podium. His scaled hands trembled slightly as he activated the holographic display. "Distinguished delegates," he began, his voice carrying the weight of impending doom. "We have a code red situation involving the humans." A collective shudder rippled through the chamber. The Zephyrins clutched their tentacles. The crystalline collective dimmed their light frequencies in distress. Even the normally unflappable void dwellers seemed to shrink into their dimensional pockets. "As you know," Vex continued, "we've been monitoring Earth since their recent admission to the Galactic Federation. We thought we understood their capacity for violence. We were wrong. Dead wrong." The holographic display flickered to life, showing grainy surveillance footage of a small human settlement. In the center of the image stood a tiny human juvenile, no more than 3 feet tall, with what appeared to be a massive 4-legged killing machine beside it. The creature was easily twice the child's size, covered in thick fur, and sporting a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth. "Sweet nebulas of Arcturus," whispered Ambassador Quill, a bird-like delegate whose feathers were now standing on end. "Is that human cub controlling that beast?" "It gets worse," Vex said grimly. He enhanced the image, zooming in on the child's face. The human appeared to be smiling, actually enjoying itself while standing next to certain death. "Our xenobiologists have identified the creature as an apex predator from Earth's ecosystem, and the human seems to have formed some kind of bond with it." The footage continued, showing the child placing its small hand on the predator's head. Instead of being immediately devoured, the creature appeared to enjoy the contact, even leaning into it. "By the 7 moons of Kepler," gasped Council Leader Zara, her crystalline form flickering with alarm. "The humans have weaponized their young. They're using their cubs to domesticate apex predators." "But how?" squeaked a delegate from the back. "Our own military scientists have tried for millennia to control our planet's top predators. The casualty rates were astronomical." Commander Vex's expression grew even more grim, which was quite an achievement considering his natural resting face already looked like he'd been sucking on space lemons. "That's not the worst part. According to our intelligence, this isn't an isolated incident. Reports are coming in from across the human homeworld. Apparently this practice is widespread. Millions of these human-predator partnerships exist." The chamber erupted in panicked chatter. Several delegates began hyperventilating, which was particularly impressive for the methane-breathing species. "Order! Order!" Zara's voice cut through the chaos like a laser through butter. "Commander Vex, what do we know about the scope of this threat?" "Our deep space reconnaissance indicates that humans don't just bond with one type of predator. They've somehow managed to create alliances with multiple species across their entire planet's ecosystem. Some reports suggest they even cohabitate with these creatures in their own dwellings." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Living with apex predators? The very idea was beyond comprehension for species that had spent millions of years evolving specifically to avoid such arrangements. "Furthermore," Vex continued, clearly enjoying the dramatic effect, "preliminary evidence suggests that humans may be selectively breeding these creatures to enhance their combat effectiveness. They appear to be creating entire bloodlines of super predators, each generation more formidable than the last." Ambassador Quill raised a shaky wing. "Commander, what are our options?" "Limited," Vex admitted. "We could attempt a preemptive strike, but if the humans can command apex predators as easily as the footage suggests, our conventional forces might be inadequate. We need more intelligence." Council Leader Zara's crystalline form pulsed with decision-making energy. "Very well, Ambassador Quill, you'll lead a diplomatic mission to Earth. Your objective is to observe these human-predator alliances and determine the extent of the threat to galactic security." Quill's feathers drooped. "Me? But I specialize in peaceful negotiations with herbivore species." "Exactly," Zero replied. "If anyone can survive first contact with weaponized human cubs and their predator armies, it's someone they'll underestimate." As the council session ended and delegates began filing out in various states of distress, none of them realized they'd just witnessed the most spectacular misinterpretation of a boy playing fetch with his dog in the history of interstellar relations. The galaxy's fate now hung in the balance, and it was about to be decided by the universe's most dangerous combination: alien paranoia and humanity's inexplicable ability to turn every apex predator into a cuddle buddy. 3 days later, Ambassador Quill's diplomatic shuttle touched down at Edwards Air Force Base, with all the grace of a nervous pigeon landing on a hot stove. The bird-like alien emerged from his craft, clutching a briefcase full of recording equipment and what appeared to be several emergency ration packs designed for species who might not survive their first diplomatic mission. Captain Jake Morrison stood waiting on the tarmac, hands in his pockets, looking about as military as a guy in uniform could while still maintaining the casual demeanor of someone who'd rather be fishing. At 35, Jake had seen enough weird stuff in his Air Force career to roll with most punches. But an alien diplomat coming to Earth specifically to investigate humanity's terrifying predator partnerships was definitely a new one. Ambassador Quill, I presume? Jake extended his hand, then quickly withdrew it when he remembered the briefing about alien contact protocols. Welcome to Earth. I'm Captain Morrison, your liaison for this visit. Quill's large, owl-like eyes blinked rapidly as he processed Jake's casual tone. According to his intelligence reports, he was standing before one of Earth's military commanders, a probable apex predator himself, trained in the ancient human art of bonding with death machines. Yet the human seemed almost relaxed. Captain Morrison, Quill replied, his translator making his natural chirping sound like a nervous British butler. I appreciate your willingness to facilitate this investigation into your species' unusual military practices. Jake's eyebrows shot up. Military practices? I thought this was about cultural exchange and maybe showing you around some local attractions. You know, the Grand Canyon, maybe Disneyland. Please, Captain, Quill interrupted, his feathers ruffling with anxiety. There's no need for deception. We know about your predator armies. Our intelligence is quite thorough. Predator armies? Jake looked genuinely confused, which only made Quill more nervous. The human was either an excellent actor or completely unaware of his own species' terrifying capabilities. Both possibilities were equally disturbing. Perhaps we should begin with a controlled demonstration, Quill suggested, pulling out a tablet covered in alien symbols. Our reports indicate that human cubs are particularly effective at commanding these creatures. Could you arrange for us to observe one of these partnerships in action? Jake scratched his head, still trying to parse what the alien was talking about. Then a light bulb went off. Oh, wait. Are you talking about pets? Like dogs and cats? Pets? Quill's translator struggled with the concept. You mean the apex predators are recreational? Well, yeah, companionship, mostly. Some working roles, but mainly they're just part of the family. Jake was starting to get that sinking feeling that usually preceded his biggest headaches. Look, why don't we head over to the base housing area? My neighbor's kid has a dog. Golden retriever, real friendly. Quill made frantic notes on his tablet. Golden retriever. Yes, our files indicate this is one of your most dangerous breeding programs. The name alone suggests precious metal coloring for camouflage purposes, and retriever clearly indicates a hunting specialization. It means they fetch sticks, Jake said slowly. Fetch sticks? Ah, training exercises with projectile weapons, very practical. Jake decided to just roll with it. 20 minutes later, they stood outside a modest base house where 8-year-old Tommy Chen was playing in his front yard with Buster, a 3-year-old golden retriever who had never met a tennis ball he didn't love, or a mailman he didn't want to greet with enthusiastic tail wagging. Tommy looked up as they approached, his gap-toothed grin lighting up his face. Hi, Captain Morrison. Is that an alien? Cool. Buster, look. We have visitors. Buster immediately bounded over, tongue lolling out, tail creating its own weather system as it wagged. He approached Quill with the kind of unrestrained enthusiasm that golden retrievers reserve for literally everyone they meet. Quill stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his own talons. Dear Cosmos, it's enormous, and it's approaching with aggressive intent. He wants to say hello, Tommy explained cheerfully, completely oblivious to the alien's terror. Buster loves meeting new people. Don't you, boy? Buster sat on command, still wiggling with barely contained excitement, and offered Quill his paw. The creature is presenting a weapon appendage, Quill whispered into his recorder. The human cub appears to have trained it to offer its primary striking tool as a show of dominance. He's shaking hands, Jake said weakly. It's polite. Polite? This is psychological warfare at its finest. Quill made more frantic notes. The predator demonstrates its capacity for violence while the human cub maintains complete emotional control. Remarkable tactical development for such a young specimen. Tommy giggled and scratched behind Buster's ears. The dog immediately melted into a puddle of contentment, leaning against the boy's leg with his eyes half closed in pure bliss. Sweet galaxies, Quill breathed. Look at the predator's submission posture. The human cub has achieved total dominance through some form of neural manipulation technique. It's called petting, Jake said, wondering if it was too late to request a transfer to a nice simple war zone somewhere. And observe the creature's response to this petting, Quill continued, documenting everything. Complete pacification. The implications for battlefield applications are staggering. Tommy threw a tennis ball across the yard. Buster immediately gave chase, retrieved it, and brought it back, dropping it at Tommy's feet with his tail going a mile a minute. Quill's tablet nearly slipped from his trembling talons. Did you see that? The human cub commanded the predator with a projectile, and it immediately executed a complex tactical maneuver before returning the weapon. This level of obedience suggests months, possibly years of intensive training. Or 15 minutes at any dog park in America, Jake muttered. Captain Morrison, Quill said gravely, I need to see more. How extensive are these human-predator operations? Are there training facilities, command structures, other species involved? Jake looked at Tommy, who was now teaching Buster to roll over, while Quill documented what he clearly believed was an advanced military demonstration. The kid was having the time of his life, completely unaware that he was single-handedly convincing an alien diplomat that humanity had weaponized man's best friend. Ugh. Yeah, Jake sighed, already dreading the phone calls he'd have to make. I can show you more, but, Ambassador, you might want to sit down for this part. As they prepared to leave, Buster gave Quill one final tail wag and a friendly woof. Quill nearly fainted on the spot, interpreting it as either a battle cry or a death threat. The galaxy's fate was hanging by a thread, and that thread was currently covered in dog hair and enthusiasm. The next morning, Jake made what would later be remembered as either the best or worst decision in human diplomatic history. He decided to take Ambassador Quill to Riverside Dog Park to show him how normal this all is. As they walked through the gates, Jake gestured broadly at the scene before them. See, just regular people with their pets, nothing military about it. Quill's feathers stood on end as he surveyed what his trained diplomatic eye could only interpret as the most sophisticated military training facility he'd ever witnessed. Dozens of humans, from small cubs to elderly pack leaders, commanded an army of various four-legged creatures in what appeared to be complex tactical exercises. Captain Morrison, Quill whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of happy barking. This is clearly a command and control center. Look at the organized chaos, the multiple species coordination, the hierarchical structure. Jake watched a Labrador chase a frisbee while a toddler clapped with delight. That's just Rex playing fetch with little Emma. Rex, Quill repeated, making frantic notes, obviously a military designation. And observe the projectile training with the disc-shaped weapon. The precision, the timing. He paused as Rex caught the frisbee midair and brought it back. The retrieval protocols are flawless. A jogger ran past, with a border collie keeping perfect pace beside her. Quill nearly dropped his tablet. Advanced reconnaissance unit, he muttered. Note the synchronized movement patterns and the obvious intelligence-gathering mission. That's just Sarah taking Max for a run, Jake said, feeling his headache intensify. Sarah and Max. Clearly code names. Captain, I must ask, how do you maintain operational security with such public displays of your military assets? Before Jake could answer, they were approached by a small, energetic woman in her 70s, being dragged along by 3 chihuahuas, who were apparently very important, and everyone needed to know about it immediately. Oh, hello there, Mrs. Patterson called out cheerfully as her tiny army of ankle-biters yapped aggressively at everything within a 50-foot radius. Are you new to the park? I'm Eleanor Patterson, and these are my boys, Napoleon, Caesar, and General Patton. Quill took one look at the 3 tiny, vibrating dogs and nearly had a complete nervous breakdown. Captain, he hissed, we need to evacuate immediately. This human has named her predators after military leaders. This is clearly a specialized assault unit. They're chihuahuas, Jake said weakly. They weigh like 4 pounds each. Small size indicates stealth capabilities, Quill replied, backing away, as Napoleon decided that this strange bird creature needed to be informed, at maximum volume, that he was in Napoleon's park, and Napoleon had opinions about this development. Mrs. Patterson beamed proudly. Oh, don't mind their barking, they're just protective. They know you're not from around here. She looked at Quill with grandmotherly curiosity. Are you wearing a costume, dear? It's very realistic. Ma'am, Jake intervened quickly. This is Ambassador Quill. He's from very far away. He's here to learn about American pet culture. Oh, how wonderful. Well, you've come to the right place. I've been training dogs for 60 years. These three are my pride and joy. Aren't you, my little warriors? The Chihuahuas, apparently taking this as encouragement, increased their volume and began what Quill could only interpret as a coordinated intimidation display. 60 years of training, Quill whispered into his recorder. Multiple generations of breeding programs. Note the tactical terminology. Warriors, protective, training. This elderly human is clearly a master strategist, possibly the facility commander. Mrs. Patterson, oblivious to Quill's terror, continued chatting. The secret is establishing dominance early and maintaining consistent pack hierarchy. You have to show them who's the alpha, but with love and positive reinforcement. Quill's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. Alpha protocols, positive reinforcement torture techniques. Captain Morrison, this human is openly discussing advanced psychological warfare methods. She's talking about house training, Jake said, wondering if it was too late to fake his own death and disappear into witness protection. A nearby German shepherd caught sight of a suspicious squirrel and barked once, sharply. The entire park's dog population immediately went on high alert, creating a cascade of barks, howls, and general excitement that lasted approximately 30 seconds before everyone went back to their previous activities. Did you observe that? Quill was now making notes so quickly that his stylus was smoking. A single command from the large unit triggered immediate coordinated response from all operatives, then simultaneous stand-down on an unspoken signal. This level of communication sophistication suggests either telepathic abilities or technology beyond our current understanding. It's called barking, Jake said. Dogs bark at stuff. Other dogs hear barking, they bark too. It's not a conspiracy. Of course it's not a conspiracy, Captain. It's operational doctrine. Their conversation was interrupted by a joyful golden retriever, who had escaped from his owner and decided that Quill looked like he needed a good sniffing. The dog approached at full enthusiasm, tail wagging, and immediately began the important work of determining what this strange new creature smelled like. Quill froze in absolute terror as the dog's nose investigated his legs. Captain Morrison, I'm under direct assault by a reconnaissance unit. Do I have permission to defend myself? Just stay still, Jake advised. He's being friendly. Friendly reconnaissance is still reconnaissance, Quill hissed. The golden retriever, satisfied with his investigation, looked up at Quill with the kind of pure, uncomplicated joy that golden retrievers are famous for. Then, because golden retrievers are basically furry ambassadors of happiness, he sat down and offered Quill his paw for a handshake. The creature is presenting surrender terms, Quill interpreted. Should I accept the treaty? Shake his paw, Jake suggested. It'll make him happy. Quill gingerly extended one talon and briefly touched the dog's paw. The golden retriever immediately wagged harder and gave Quill's hand a friendly lick. Chemical analysis via saliva contact, Quill recorded. Possible biological warfare application, or intelligence gathering through taste-based reconnaissance. He's being affectionate, Jake said, watching his career in diplomacy circle the drain in real time. As they prepared to leave the park, Jake finally understood the magnitude of the cultural catastrophe unfolding before his eyes. Every single normal interaction between humans and dogs was being interpreted as evidence of humanity's terrifying military biological complex. A kid throwing a ball was weapons training. An elderly woman with chihuahuas was a special forces commander. A friendly golden retriever was a reconnaissance operative. And the worst part? Jake was starting to realize that no amount of explanation was going to convince Quill otherwise. The alien had already made up his mind. Humans were the galaxy's most terrifying species, and their secret weapon was weaponized friendship. Ambassador, Jake said carefully as they walked back to the car, when you file your report, maybe you could mention that these are all just normal family pets, for context? Quill looked at him with something that might have been pity. Captain Morrison, I appreciate your dedication to operational security, but my duty is to report what I've observed. And what I've observed today changes everything we thought we knew about human capabilities. Jake nodded glumly. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he could hear his commanding officer asking why exactly the alien ambassador was requesting an emergency evacuation, because he'd been psychologically traumatized by a poodle. The galaxy was about to learn that humans had turned apex predators into cuddle buddies, and apparently that was the most terrifying thing anyone could imagine. That evening, while Jake was stress-eating pizza and contemplating the spectacular failure of his diplomatic career, Ambassador Quill transmitted his preliminary findings to the Galactic Council via secure quantum relay. What arrived at the council chambers was nothing short of a diplomatic nuclear bomb wrapped in cheerful alien bureaucracy. Council leader Zara was reviewing routine trade agreements when her communication console started flashing priority red. The timestamp showed the message had been flagged as immediate existential threat by the Council's automated threat assessment system. That had only happened 3 times in galactic history, and 2 of those involved actual universe-ending phenomena. Fellow Council members, Zara's voice carried across the emergency session that had been called at 300 Galactic Standard Time. Ambassador Quill's report makes for disturbing reading. Commander Vex, who had been roused from his sleeping chamber and was consequently even more irritable than usual, activated the holographic display. Read them the highlights, Zara. Some of us need our beauty sleep. Very well. Zara's crystalline form pulsed nervously as she began reading directly from Quill's report. Day 2. Field Report Alpha 7. Observed human military training facility disguised as recreational area. Witness coordinated multi-species operations involving dozens of apex predators under direct human command. Facility commander elderly human female, designation Eleanor Patterson, demonstrated advanced psychological warfare techniques on specialized assault units. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of several delegates hyperventilating. It gets worse, Zara continued. Human cubs, as young as 24 months, are assigned personal apex predators for bonding exercises. Observed one such pairing where human juvenile achieved complete psychological dominance over creature 3 times its body mass through unknown neural manipulation techniques. Ambassador Flux, a gelatinous representative from the Andromeda Collective, began literally melting with anxiety. 24 months? They're training toddlers to command death machines? Furthermore, Zara read on, her voice becoming increasingly strained, the humans have developed communication protocols that allow instant coordination across entire predator populations. A single vocal command can trigger simultaneous responses from hundreds of units across vast distances. Commander Vex's military brain was already calculating worst-case scenarios. If they can coordinate that many units instantly, their command and control capabilities exceed anything in our combined fleets. How did our intelligence miss something this massive? The answer came from the back of the chamber, where Intelligence Director Crone, a shadowy figure whose species had evolved specifically for espionage, materialized from what appeared to be empty air. Sir, we believe the humans have been deliberately concealing the true scope of their capabilities. Their public information networks contain millions of references to these pet partnerships. But we now realize this was disinformation, designed to make the program appear recreational rather than military. Millions? Squeaked a delegate whose translator was struggling with the concept. Our latest analysis suggests nearly 40% of human households maintain at least one apex predator. That's approximately 130 million active human-predator partnerships on Earth alone. The chamber erupted in panic. Several delegates began making emergency calls to their homeworlds. The representative from Kepler Prime fainted and had to be carried out by medical drones. Order! Zara's voice cut through the chaos like a laser through space jelly. Director Kron, what's the current threat level? Krone's shadowy form shifted ominously. Based on Ambassador Quill's findings, we're upgrading humanity from species of interest to galactic threat level 9. The only thing preventing level 10 classification is that we haven't yet observed their predator armies in actual combat operations. What about diplomatic solutions? Asked someone from the middle of the chamber. Unlikely, Commander Vex replied, his scales darkening with grim determination. Any species that can turn apex predators into willing servants isn't going to be impressed by our usual negotiation tactics. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Jake was discovering that intergalactic panic travels faster than light, but good sense travels much slower. His secure communication terminal had been buzzing non-stop for the past hour, with increasingly frantic messages from his superiors. Morrison, came the voice of General Patricia Hayes, his commanding officer. I need you to explain to me why the alien ambassador is requesting an emergency evacuation, and why his preliminary report refers to Mrs. Patterson's Chihuahuas as a specialized terror unit. Jake rubbed his temples, feeling a headache that was probably visible from orbit. Ma'am, there seems to have been a cultural misunderstanding of significant proportions. Misunderstanding? Morrison, I've got the Secretary of Defense asking me why we allowed an alien diplomat to observe classified military operations involving biological weapons. The alien thinks we've weaponized golden retrievers. To be fair, ma'am, Buster is very good at psychological warfare. You should see what he does to the mailman's morale. This is not the time for jokes, Captain. The Joint Chiefs are in emergency session. The President wants answers. And apparently half the galaxy thinks we're on the verge of conquering the universe with an army of cute puppies. Jake looked out his window, where he could see Tommy playing fetch with Buster in the yard. The apex predator was currently trying to catch his own tail, which was apparently a tactical maneuver too advanced for alien comprehension. General, Jake said slowly, what if we arranged a demonstration? Something to show the ambassador that our relationships with dogs are purely civilian and recreational. You want to give an alien diplomat who's already terrified of golden retrievers more access to dogs. What if we controlled the situation? Got Tommy and Buster, maybe a few other kids with their pets, show them doing normal, non-threatening activities, prove that we're not running a secret military program? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Morrison, you realize that if this goes wrong, it could start the first interspecies war in galactic history. Yes, ma'am, but if we don't do something, they're going to assume we're already preparing for war anyway. Back in the council chambers, the emergency session was reaching fever pitch. Commander Vex had authorized the mobilization of the 3rd, 7th, and 12th Galactic Defense Fleets. Border systems were going into lockdown. Trade with Earth was being suspended indefinitely. The humans must not be allowed to export their predator bonding technology, Vex declared. If other species learned to create these partnerships, it could destabilize the entire galactic order. What about preemptive action? Suggested someone whose voice modulator made them sound like they'd been breathing helium. Against humans who can command apex predators. Vex's laugh was humorless. Our simulations suggest that a single human child, with one of their medium-sized predators, could hold off a platoon of our finest soldiers. Then what do you suggest? Commander Vex's expression grew grimmer than a tax audit on a funeral planet. Containment, complete isolation, and hope they don't decide to expand beyond their home system. As the galaxy prepared for humanity's inevitable conquest of the known universe, Tommy was teaching Buster how to high-five, completely unaware that this advanced tactical coordination exercise was about to convince an entire alien civilization that 8-year-old boys were the most dangerous military commanders in existence. The irony was perfect. Humanity was about to become the most feared species in the galaxy, and their secret weapon was friendship, belly rubs, and the occasional game of fetch. The stage was set for the most ridiculous first-contact disaster in the history of interstellar relations, and it was all going to hinge on whether one golden retriever could convince an alien diplomat that sometimes a good boy is just a good boy. 3 days later, what started as Jake's desperate attempt to prevent an interstellar war had somehow evolved into the most terrifying military standoff in galactic history. Above Edwards Air Force Base, the Galactic Council's first contact fleet hung in Earth's orbit like ominous metallic storm clouds, their weapons powered down but ready. On the ground, in a peaceful suburban park that had been hastily declared a neutral zone, the fate of human-alien relations was about to be decided by an 8-year-old boy and his golden retriever. Ambassador Quill stood behind a portable force field generator, surrounded by a squad of the galaxy's finest soldiers. Each warrior was encased in enough armor to stop a small asteroid, equipped with weapons that could theoretically level a city block, and absolutely terrified of what they were about to witness. The human cub in question was currently tying his shoes, while his apex predator was investigating a dandelion with the intense concentration that golden retrievers reserve for things that might need to be sniffed. Ambassador, crackled Commander Vex's voice through the communication array, all fleet assets are in position. If this demonstration confirms our worst fears about human capabilities, we're prepared to implement containment protocols. Jake, standing nearby with enough stress sweat to water a small garden, keyed his own radio. General Hayes, please tell me you have every news outlet on Earth standing by to broadcast this. If this goes sideways, I want the whole world to know that humanity's first contact with aliens ended because we couldn't explain what a pet is. Morrison, came the general's voice, tight with barely controlled panic. There are 17 alien warships in our orbit. The president is in the situation room. NASA has gone through 3 boxes of antacids. This better work. Tommy looked up from his shoes and waved cheerfully at the assembled alien military force. Hi, everybody. Are you here to meet Buster? He's really friendly. Buster, hearing his name, looked up from his dandelion investigation and immediately zeroed in on the most interesting thing in his current field of vision. A bunch of new people who obviously needed to be greeted. His tail began wagging with the enthusiasm of a helicopter rotor, and he started pulling toward the force field barrier. "Containment breach," shouted one of the alien soldiers. "The Predator is attempting to assault our perimeter." "He wants to say hello," Tommy explained patiently, as if he were talking to particularly slow kindergartners. Buster loves meeting new people, don't you, boy? Buster, blissfully unaware that his existence was currently the subject of galactic military planning, sat down and tilted his head with the kind of expectant expression that clearly said, "Well, are we going to play or what?" Quill's voice was barely above a whisper as he spoke into his recorder. The human cub demonstrates complete confidence in its ability to control the creature's aggressive impulses. Note the predator's apparent calm before the storm. This is clearly a calculated psychological warfare demonstration. "Ambassador," Jake called out, "what you're seeing is a normal boy with his normal dog. There's nothing military about this. Watch." He turned to Tommy. "Hey Tommy, can you show our visitors how you and Buster play?" Tommy's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Sure, Buster, sit." Buster immediately sat, his tail still wagging so hard it was creating small dust clouds. The alien soldiers collectively took a step back. One of them muttered something that the translator rendered as instantaneous obedience to verbal commands. "Dear gods, what have we gotten ourselves into?" "Now watch this." Tommy pulled out a tennis ball, and Buster's entire universe suddenly consisted of that single, perfect green sphere of possibility. The dog's eyes locked onto the ball with laser focus, his body quivering with barely contained excitement. "The human cub has produced a projectile weapon," Quill reported, his voice climbing toward hysteria. "The predator has entered what appears to be combat readiness mode." "It's a tennis ball," Jake said weakly. "It's literally just a tennis ball." Tommy drew his arm back and threw the ball in a perfect arc across the park. Buster exploded into motion, his golden form streaking across the grass, with the kind of joyful abandon that only comes from a dog who has found his life's purpose in that moment. The alien military formation immediately went to high alert, weapons swiveled to track Buster's movement, emergency shields powered up. Someone actually began counting down from 10 in what sounded like preparation for orbital bombardment. "Target is moving at approximately 35 kilometers per hour, reported one of the soldiers. "Trajectory suggests flanking maneuver." "He's chasing a ball," Jake shouted over the increasingly frantic alien chatter. Buster caught the tennis ball in mid-air with a spectacular leap, executed a perfect four-paw landing, and immediately began the return journey to Tommy. His tail was wagging so hard that his entire back end was wiggling, and he had that unmistakable golden retriever expression that clearly communicated pure, unadulterated joy. "The predator has successfully intercepted the projectile and is returning to base," Quill whispered. "The precision, the speed, the tactical awareness. This is military coordination at a level we've never encountered." Buster dropped the ball at Tommy's feet and immediately sat, looking up with the kind of hopeful expression that dogs have perfected over millennia of evolutionary partnership with humans. "Good boy," Tommy said, scratching behind Buster's ears. "Who's a good boy? You are. Yes, you are." The praise sent Buster into paroxysms of happiness. He wiggled, he panted, he did a little play bow, and then he rolled over onto his back to expose his belly for potential rubs. The alien military formation was now in complete chaos. "The predator has assumed a submission position," someone shouted. "Is this a surrender ritual?" asked another. "Why is the human cub using such a pleasant vocal tone? Is this part of the psychological conditioning?" Quill was making notes so frantically that his tablet was starting to smoke. "Observe the reward system in action. The human provides positive auditory reinforcement, causing the predator to enter a state of apparent euphoria and complete vulnerability. This suggests conditioning protocols beyond anything in our psychological warfare manuals." Tommy, completely oblivious to the galactic panic he was causing, knelt down and began rubbing Buster's belly. The dog's back leg immediately started kicking in that automatic response that dogs have to good belly rubs, and his tongue lolled out in an expression of absolute bliss. "The predator appears to be experiencing some kind of neurological override," reported one of the alien scientists. "The human's physical contact is triggering involuntary muscle responses." "It's a belly rub," Jake said, his voice now carrying the tone of a man who had given up on rational discourse. "Dogs like belly rubs. It makes them happy." "Happy?" Quill's translators seemed to struggle with the concept when applied to apex predators. "The creature experiences positive emotional states from human contact?" Before Jake could answer, a squirrel had the profound misfortune to run across the park about 50 yards away. Buster's head immediately snapped up, his ears perked forward, and he let out a single, sharp bark of alert. The alien response was immediate and catastrophic. Alarms began blaring across the fleet. Emergency shields slammed into place. Several soldiers actually dove for cover behind their equipment. All units, Commander Vex's voice crackled over every communication channel. "The Predator has detected an unknown threat. Prepare for combat operations." "It's just a squirrel," Jake yelled, but his voice was drowned out by the sounds of alien military preparation for what they clearly believed was an imminent battle. Buster, meanwhile, had dismissed the squirrel as not particularly interesting and was now focused on something far more important. Tommy had picked up the tennis ball again. The dog's attention shifted completely away from the squirrel and back to the ball, with the single-minded focus that golden retrievers bring to all tennis ball-related activities. "Threat assessment complete," Quill recorded. The Predator evaluated the potential danger, determined it was non-critical, and immediately returned attention to its human handler. This level of tactical discipline is unprecedented. Tommy threw the ball again, and once again Buster bounded after it with pure joy. But this time, as he was returning with the ball, something wonderful and terrible happened. The ball slipped from his mouth and rolled toward the alien perimeter. Buster, being a good boy who always returned the ball to his human, trotted directly toward the force field barrier. "Incoming!" screamed someone in the alien formation. "He wants his ball back," Tommy called out helpfully. "Could you throw it to him?" The tension in the air was so thick you could have cut it with a plasma sword. Here was humanity's supposed ultimate weapon, approaching the galaxy's finest military force, and his only apparent objective was retrieving a tennis ball. Ambassador Quill, in a moment that would either go down in history as the bravest or most foolish act in galactic diplomacy, stepped forward. With trembling talons, he reached through the force field and picked up the tennis ball. Buster sat immediately, his tail wagging hopefully, and looked up at Quill with the kind of patient, expectant expression that clearly said, "I know you're new at this, but the game is pretty simple. You throw the ball, I bring it back. Ready?" For a long moment, the fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. Then Quill, his voice barely audible, asked, Do I throw it?" "Yeah," Tommy encouraged. "He'll bring it right back to you." Quill drew back his arm and tossed the ball in a wobbly arc. Buster immediately gave chase, caught it, and returned to sit directly in front of the alien ambassador. He dropped the ball and looked up with an expression of such pure, uncomplicated friendliness that something fundamental shifted in Quill's understanding of the universe. "The Predator brought me the projectile," Quill said slowly. "He likes you," Tommy said simply. "Dogs are like that. They like everybody." And that's when the final piece of the cosmic puzzle fell into place. Buster, sensing that this strange new creature seemed nervous, did what golden retrievers do when they encounter nervous creatures. He offered his paw for a handshake and gave Quill his most reassuring doggy smile. The gesture was so fundamentally, innocently friendly, that even the most paranoid military mind couldn't interpret it as anything other than what it was: an invitation to friendship, from a creature who had been bred for thousands of years to be humanity's companion, helper, and friend. The silence that followed was broken by Tommy's cheerful voice. "I think he wants to be friends with you." Commander Vex's voice came over the radio, quieter now, uncertain. "Ambassador Quill, what's your assessment?" Quill looked down at Buster, who was still offering his paw and wagging hopefully. Then he looked at Tommy, who was beaming with the kind of uncomplicated pride that only an 8-year-old can have in his best friend. Finally, he looked at Jake, who was holding his breath and probably praying to whatever deities watch over diplomatic disasters. "Commander," Quill said slowly, "I believe we may have made an error in our initial assessment." And somewhere in the back of his golden retriever brain, Buster was just happy that he'd made a new friend. After all, that's what good boys do. 6 months later, Jake Morrison sat in his new office at the newly established Earth Diplomatic Relations Center, staring at a report that would have been completely unbelievable if he hadn't lived through the events that led through it. The brass nameplate on his desk now read Admiral Morrison, Director of Interspecies Cultural Misunderstandings, which was possibly the most accurate job title in the history of military bureaucracy. Outside his window, he could see the construction crews putting finishing touches on the Galactic Embassy complex. The building's design had been specifically requested by the alien delegations. A sprawling single-story structure with multiple outdoor spaces, dog runs, and what the architectural plans diplomatically referred to as Apex Predator Recreation Facilities. The real reason, which Jake kept to himself, was that the galactic community was still too terrified to meet with humans anywhere that didn't have immediate escape routes to the outdoors. His computer chimed with an incoming priority message. The sender was listed as Ambassador Quill, Galactic Council Special Liaison for Human Apex Predator Relations. Jake couldn't help but smile as he opened the message. "Admiral Morrison," the message began, I am writing to inform you that the monthly tribute shipment from the Centauri Trade Federation has arrived. The cargo manifest lists 3,000 premium tennis balls, 1,500 kilograms of what our translators call bacon-flavored treats, and 47 automated ball-throwing devices. The Andromeda Collective has also sent their quarterly offering of chew toys, along with a formal request that humanity continue to refrain from expanding their predator armies beyond the Sol system. Jake rubbed his temples. Even 6 months later, he still couldn't quite believe how completely the galaxy had misunderstood the demonstration. Instead of realizing that dogs were harmless companions, the alien witnesses had come to an even more terrifying conclusion. Humans were so powerful that they could turn apex predators into willing servants through the sheer force of their benevolent leadership. The tennis ball throw that should have demonstrated play had instead been interpreted as evidence of human commanders directing their forces through mystical projectile communication. Buster's obvious joy at retrieving the ball was seen as proof of the deep psychological conditioning that made human battle companions eager to serve, and the belly rub that had sent Buster into tail-wagging bliss, that had convinced the observers that humans possessed some form of neural manipulation technology that could pacify any creature through physical contact. But the real nail in the coffin had been Buster's friendly offer of his paw to Ambassador Quill. The aliens had interpreted this as the ultimate proof of human supremacy. Not only could humans command apex predators, but they could make those predators voluntarily submit to alien authority figures as well. In the alien military mind, this suggested that humans could potentially turn any species' apex predators against them. The phone on Jake's desk buzzed. "Admiral Morrison," came the voice of his assistant, Lieutenant Sarah Chen. "You have a video call from Commander Vex." Jake accepted the call, and the familiar reptilian features of the Galactic Defense Force commander appeared on his screen. Vex looked considerably more relaxed than he had 6 months ago, though he still maintained the nervous energy of someone who believed he was regularly communicating with the galaxy's most dangerous species. "Admiral Morrison," Vex began, his translator giving his natural hiss a formal military tone, "I wanted to personally thank you for your restraint in the recent Kepler sector incident." "Restraint?" Jake asked, genuinely confused. "When the Corellian Empire refused to honor the trade agreements, we were prepared for you to deploy your predator forces. The fact that you resolved the situation through conventional diplomacy shows remarkable mercy." Jake had to bite his tongue to keep from laughing. The Kepler sector incident had been resolved when he'd sent a single diplomatic note pointing out that the Corellians were violating their own trade laws. Apparently, the galaxy now attributed any display of human reasonableness to the fact that they were so confident in their military supremacy that they didn't need to use it. "We believe in peaceful solutions, Commander," Jake replied diplomatically. "Of course," Vex nodded sagely. "When you have the capacity to turn an entire planet's ecosystem against its inhabitants, conventional military force becomes redundant. We deeply respect humanity's commitment to proportional response." After ending the call, Jake walked to his window and looked out at the embassy grounds. In the distance, he could see Tommy Chen, now 9 years old, playing fetch with Buster in what the aliens insisted on calling the demonstration area. Tommy had become something of a celebrity in galactic diplomatic circles, though he remained completely oblivious to his status as the galaxy's most feared military commander. A few months ago, the Galactic Council had formally requested that Tommy be given the honorary rank of Supreme Battle Coordinator in recognition of his unparalleled success in Apex Predator tactical demonstrations. Jake had politely declined on Tommy's behalf, explaining that the boy was focused on his education. This had somehow been interpreted as evidence that humans began their military training so young that formal ranks were considered premature for 9-year-olds. The really absurd part was how the misunderstanding had snowballed into genuine political power. When the Galactic Council had initially tried to impose trade restrictions on Earth as a containment measure, a single statement from the human ambassador had been enough to reverse the decision. The statement had been a perfectly reasonable explanation of Earth's trading policies, but the aliens had interpreted it as a barely veiled threat about humanity's capacity to export their apex predator partnerships to other worlds. Now, Earth's trade negotiations consisted mainly of other civilizations offering increasingly elaborate bribes to keep humans happy. The Zephians had established a permanent embassy on Earth specifically to study human-predator bonding techniques, which mostly involved their diplomats nervously watching dogs play in parks while taking copious notes about tactical fetch maneuvers and submission belly rub protocols. Jake's contemplation was interrupted by another message, this one from the president himself. Jake, it read. The UN Security Council has unanimously agreed to establish the Department of Accidental Galactic Dominance, with you as the first director. Congratulations, you've successfully conquered the known universe without firing a shot, invading a planet, or apparently doing much of anything except failing to explain what a golden retriever is. The aliens are requesting our input on reforming the Galactic Constitution. Please advise on how humanity would like to restructure interstellar law. Jake stared at the message for a long moment. Somewhere in the park, Tommy was teaching Buster how to shake hands with his other paw, completely unaware that this advanced bilateral appendage coordination training was being carefully observed by 3 different alien intelligence services. The truly beautiful irony of the whole situation was that humanity had achieved galactic supremacy through the most human thing imaginable, the inability of other species to understand why humans would want to be friends with everything, including creatures specifically evolved to be dangerous. The aliens lived in a universe where apex predators were things to be feared, avoided, or at best carefully managed from a distance. The concept that humans actively sought out these creatures, brought them into their homes, and formed emotional bonds with them was so alien to their thinking that they could only interpret it as evidence of humanity's terrifying power. And so the galaxy had restructured itself around accommodating what they believed to be humanity's inevitable expansion. Trade routes were redesigned to ensure Earth received priority access to resources. Diplomatic protocols were rewritten to account for humanity's presumed ability to end any conflict by deploying biological assets. The Galactic Defense Force had even developed new training programs specifically focused on countering human-predator coordination tactics, which mostly involved their soldiers practicing how to throw tennis balls as a distraction technique. Jake picked up his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Mrs. Patterson, it's Admiral Morrison. Yes, the title is new. Listen, I need to ask you a favor. The Galactic Council wants to observe what they're calling small unit terror tactics, and I was wondering if you could bring Napoleon, Caesar, and General Patton to the embassy tomorrow for a demonstration." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Oh, you mean you want the boys to show off their tricks? They'd love that. Should I bring their little outfits, the ones with the military patches?" Jake closed his eyes. Mrs. Patterson had recently taken to dressing her chihuahuas in tiny military striped jackets because she thought it was cute and patriotic. The aliens had interpreted this as evidence that humans had formal military ranks for their smallest biological weapons. "That would be perfect, Mrs. Patterson, thank you." As Jake hung up the phone, he reflected on the beautiful absurdity of the situation. Humanity had become the most feared species in the galaxy, and their secret weapon was the simple revolutionary concept that maybe apex predators just wanted belly rubs and someone to throw their ball. In the end, the galaxy's greatest threat wasn't human military might, technological superiority, or strategic brilliance. It was humanity's inexplicable ability to look at something with teeth and claws and think, "I bet that would make a great friend." And somewhere in a park outside his window, Tommy Chen continued to play fetch with Buster, 2 best friends completely oblivious to the fact that their friendship had accidentally conquered the stars. The real alpha predator, as it turned out, wasn't the golden retriever with the wagging tail and the slobbery tennis ball. It was the 8-year-old boy who had looked at that predator and decided they should be friends. The galaxy would never be the same.